Hello, good afternoon and welcome to ODI Leeds for this afternoon's ODI lunchtime lectures. Our speaker today is Tom Forth, who's going to talk about real journey time, but I'm just going to do a very brief introduction and welcome. Welcome to everyone here in the room, literally tens of people here, one of the biggest crowds we've had for one of our ODI lunchtime lectures here in Leeds. Hello to everyone watching on the live stream. In particular, our colleagues at HQ in London, and also the guys at Transport for West Midlands in Birmingham, who are the subject of Tom's talk today, and to everyone else watching along on the live stream as well. I'm Neil McClure, Head of Transport Innovation here at ODI Leeds, and I run Open Transport North, which is our new transport-focused spin-off of ODI Leeds, which we launched in 2018, and which was the vehicle by which we actually delivered the project that Tom's going to talk about today. You can find out more about Open Transport North by visiting our website, opentransportnorth.com, and you can see all of the past projects we've been involved in with Transport for West Midlands, but also Department for Transport, Transport for the North, and various others on there as well. You can stay in touch and ask your questions of our presenter today throughout. So as you're presenting, please do raise those questions on Twitter using the hashtag ODI Fridays and also tagging us in at ODI Leeds. We'll pick those up and we'll do a question round at the end after Tom's spoken. For those of you in the room, scribble down your questions and keep those to the end, and then we'll do about a 10 or 15 minute or so Q&A at the end of the session. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce our speaker. It's a man who's famous for check shirts, Twitter threads, and buses. He's going to be talking about some or all of those today. So please do welcome to talk about real journey time, Tom Forth.
Hello everyone, thank you very much. Thanks everyone for coming here, much appreciated. Thanks everyone for watching online, even if that's in the future sometime. We get a lot of people who watch after the fact, and it's a good way to check that most of what we say is right. So obviously everyone here, welcome to here, which is where we are, which is ODI Leeds. We occupy most of the top floor of that building, and I am this person on Twitter, at Thomas Forth. ODI Leeds is at ODI Leeds on Twitter, and ODILeeds.org has a huge amount of stuff. Anyone who has joined the live stream to hear about our work on petition visualizations and Brexit, there will be nothing about that in the talk. So switch off or just learn about buses instead. ODI Leeds is made possible because of these sponsors. So I will first of all thank every single one of them who pay for this place to exist here in Central Leeds, where we can all get together and talk about open data. Without them, we couldn't pay the rent, and without paying the rent, you'd have nowhere to sit, and then we couldn't do a live stream because there would be nowhere to stream from. So we're very grateful to all of them. It's a lovely mix of private, public, universities, other types of organisations that help us do what we do. But today, I'm going to be talking about the 50 bus in Birmingham, but most specifically, real-time information boards. This is an example of a real-time information board that I think most people will be aware of something that looks a little bit similar to this. This is one on the 50 bus route from Moseley into Birmingham city centre, one of the most frequent bus routes in the world. As you can see by the fact that there's only 5 minutes between the buses here, and often they are more frequent than that. So a lot of people in Birmingham will have got this bus at 7:03 this morning to go to work in central Birmingham. And the work that I'm going to be describing uses the data that powers that screen. It's just that we record the data that powers that screen at 3,856 bus stops in the West Midlands, so all the way from Wolverhampton through Walsall, Birmingham, Coventry, Stourbridge, the whole lot. We record 3,800, and I've already forgotten exactly how many, about 3,800 of those, and we record them every 3 minutes throughout the day, every day, and we have been doing that for a year and a half. So I have a very big database. It's got about 55 million rows in it. It's quite painful, but I'm going to show you how we analyze it and what that shows us. The way that we access 3,800 bus stop informations every few minutes is via the Transport for the West Midlands API. Transport for West Midlands API is created, as you would imagine by the name, by Transport for the West Midlands, which is the body that organises and helps to control parts of transport in the West Midlands. You could sign up today at apiportal.tfwm.org.uk, and you could, if you wanted, do everything that I'm going to show in this talk. We have not gone over the API free access limit to do anything in this talk. And one of the reasons is because that is a fantastic API. The secret, if you want to reproduce it, is that in one call, you can get all of the times for a whole route. So you don't have to call all 3,800 bus stops. You can just say, I want every single bus stop departure time for the 50 route, and it will give you all 60 or 70 bus stop departure times. So 10,000 hits per day is easily enough to do what we've done in this work. This is what the tool looks like that helps us analyze the data that I've been talking about. So you can go and play with it. Please don't do it during the talk because it might break. Do it immediately after the talk, and then it will definitely be fine. So you can go to realjourneytime.co.uk. The real-time information board that I showed you at the start of this talk is that one there, which I've highlighted in green, because I went to this website earlier and collected all of this data. So I went to the website, I clicked on that bus stop, and then I clicked on which is the final bus stop for that route, and that's the route that the bus takes. And once I clicked on those two bus stops, the Real Journey Time tool looked up all of the buses that had travelled between those 2 points yesterday, and it draws a little graph. So this is a bus that left here at about 7:48, and it arrived here at 8 a.m. And over 100 buses did that journey yesterday, and they're all in that little scroller thing, so you can look at them. But one day is never enough. It's great for seeing if a particular disruption happens. Let's say there's roadworks, there's a crash, cricket's on at Edgbaston, something like that. You can see that. But we're really interested in many, many, many more journeys. So what we do is we say not just how many buses went from Trafalgar Road to central Birmingham yesterday. We ask how many buses went from Trafalgar Road to central Birmingham over the last 3 months, and we all put them all onto one graph. So I'll quickly show you what that looks like and what this graph means. The easiest place to start is at the bottom. From Trafalgar Road, the bus stop in Birmingham to central Birmingham is timetabled to take 12 minutes. And we see that on this graph because it says that the timetable journey time is between 10 and 15 minutes. So every single timetable journey is between 10 and 15 minutes. But this graph says, how long did the journey really take? Some journeys from Trafalgar Road to central Birmingham took between 0 and 5 minutes. That means that the data is wrong, because you would go to jail as a bus driver if you really drove from that place to central Birmingham in 0 to 5 minutes. It's just not going to happen. So we know that there are some problems with the data, but what's interesting is those are really very, very few journeys. There's various reasons why it can happen, but we can take care of that. It's not a problem. Most journeys take between 10 and 15 minutes. This has been one of the most boringly interesting discoveries that surprises no one who runs a bus company or knows about bus operations, which is that every bus runs to time. The next slide adds a caveat, but almost all buses are here. They take 15 minutes or below. And what's worrying is just these ones. There's some buses that took half an hour, 35 minutes, 25 minutes to do that short journey into Birmingham. But I should say the vast majority of the buses run to time. They take as long as they should take. They work very well. So every bus runs to time. The problem is except the ones that you need to take. So it's great, all the buses run to time except the one that you're on. And that's because you probably want to take the bus to get to work or to travel after work to go somewhere. And what we do in the Real Journey Time tool is we look at every 15-minute section of the day and we ask, over those thousands of journeys, hundreds will have taken place in each section of the day. We draw a line. The blue line is how long should that journey take? What is the timetable time? It's always about 12 minutes. So that's the blue line. It's constant throughout the day. And sure enough, if you get the bus at 6:45 in the morning here, it takes about 12 minutes. Right? It's fine. There's no traffic. It's fine. If you take the bus at midday, when everyone's at work, at school, again, it's brilliant. It takes 12 minutes. Right? The buses are brilliant. The challenge is that you probably wanted to take the bus about here to get to work, or you wanted to take the bus about here to pick up your kids, or to get home from work, or to go to some leisure pursuit. Maybe you want to watch Birmingham City, or you want to get back to King's Heath Social Club for some drinking. I don't know what you want to do. And the problem there is that at this time, at peak time, the buses are stuck in traffic exactly the same as everyone else, and therefore the buses don't go very quickly. So a journey that's timetabled to take 12 minutes into town is now going to take you about double that time. So it's up here 24 minutes, up to 30 minutes. That's how long you can reasonably expect the journey to take. And that's not because the buses are driving slowly. It's just because they're in traffic. They have to wait as does everyone else. So you can go to realjourneytime.co.uk and you can play around with all this data. You can pick any pair of bus stops in the West Midlands. You can pick any time. You can have a look at everything. Please play around with it. It's fine. And I wanted to say, before we move on to the so what of this, how did this happen? So Paul, who's sat there, has a phrase which is radically open equals massive surplus. And it doesn't really mean a lot. I don't really get it. But I'm going to explain to you why it's right and why now you will get it as well. This project, which seems quite simple, I mean, what have I done? I've just asked for 3,800 bus stops, recorded how long the buses take between them, and drawn some graphs, right? It's easy. These are all of the people that have made this project possible. Now, ONS Data Science Campus helped us out a lot. They helped us with some timetable stuff. The Open Data Institute in London and Nesta funded some of the early work into it. Transport for the West Midlands helped us. The OECO Open Data people, University of Glasgow, right. All these people helped us. And all of these technologies were required to implement the tools that we've just done. So we used QGIS to draw maps. We use MongoDB as the main database that we do. We host it on Amazon Web Services. The website API runs on ASP.NET and C# and all of this fun and games. So the point here is that almost all of these people have worked in the open. We've shared everything that we're doing throughout doing it. And what happens is every few weeks, someone comes up to me and says, Tom, you're doing something really, really stupid. We've already done this work. Why don't you just copy us or do it properly? And I go, thank you, and I copy them. And that is the advantage of being radically open, right? So we share everything we do. Sometimes it gets us into trouble. Most of the time it leads to people massively improving what we do. And that's about the idea of surplus. So you share more, you get a huge amount more back than you did just by sharing it. So now I wanted to move on from that, which was the first stage, the technical part, and my hope is that many of you could reproduce the real journey time method that we've used. Right? See, it's not tremendously difficult. What we did next was we worked with the Productivity Insights Network, who are at the University of Sheffield. And their lead on transport, who's Ian Doherty at the University of Glasgow, said to me, said, Tom, you've measured how people get around Birmingham. And that's pretty important for the productivity of Birmingham. Because if people can't get to work on time, and if they can't meet their friends on time, and if they can't get to meetings and events on time, they are less likely to be productive. And you've already got all the data that would let us show this. So why don't you work with us at the Productivity Insights Network to think about the cost to Birmingham and Greater Birmingham, the whole of the West Midlands, of unreliable journey times, on buses at peak times. That's what we've decided to look at. And you may find the write-up of all the work that we've done more accessible at Citymetric. So you can look up the Citymetric article, and it says, Birmingham isn't a big city at peak times. How poor public transport explains the UK's productivity problem. This is quite important that we took the blog that I wrote writing up the project from the Productivity Experts Network blog and got help from Citymetric to make it more interesting and more understandable, and to do things like put pictures of buses and write headlines that people understand. So this was quite a nice thing for us. I didn't write that headline. John at Citymetric wrote the headline, and it's quite a good headline, so more people clicked it. So it's great. We've had thousands and thousands of people have read that website. Lots of people have got in touch with me. Almost all positive. A few negative comments, but mostly positive. And lots of interest in our work. I'm going to talk through what we found in our work with the Productivity Insights Network. And we are going to start with this monster graph. Right, I'll quickly tell you what it is. Every green square is a UK city. Every blue circle is a French city. I've taken London and Paris and thrown them away because they are like here, and if I kept them on, you wouldn't see anything because they're really, really big, right? So London and Paris, both about city population, 12 million, that kind of thing. 12 million is like on the East Coast Main Line Railway, which runs past the building. So we're just not going to have them. So we get rid of the two biggest cities, we just look at every other city. And then what we've got up and down is the GDP per capita, the production, how prosperous, how much wealth and prosperity does that city generate per person who lives and works there. And what you'll see is you have rich cities come up to the top. Edinburgh, probably most of us who've been there know it's quite a prosperous city. It's right up at the top. Cities that don't do quite as well, Bradford, further at the bottom. And everything in between. And what we find, and this is a well-known result in economics, is that in France, the bigger cities are more productive. And we have this nice blue line, and it says the bigger the city is, the more productive it is. So Lyon is the second biggest city in France. It's quite productive. Toulouse is pretty big. It's quite productive. Saint-Etienne and Toulon are quite small. They're not very productive. And that pattern, that the bigger the city is, the more productive it is true in France, the Netherlands, Sweden, Finland, Germany, almost everywhere, the USA, almost everywhere. It's not true in the UK. So this line is completely flat in the UK. And a reason for that is that our two biggest cities that I've not chopped off the map, Birmingham and Manchester, and by which I mean Greater Birmingham and Greater Manchester, are not very productive. This is the puzzle that we want to solve. Why is Birmingham down here and not up here with Lyon? Now, one reason why Birmingham might be down there and not up with Lyon is because this is the public transport that is available to people who live in Birmingham. I've taken off all the buses, right? We're not looking at buses, we're not looking at trains, we're looking at trams, we're looking at metros, and it's quite easy to draw the tram map for Birmingham because it's one line. And until about a year ago, it didn't even go to Birmingham, right? It stopped on the edge of Birmingham in Snow Hill. So you could go from Wolverhampton, and just as you were about to get to work in Birmingham, they went, there's no more tram lines, so get off and walk from Snow Hill. Now it does go to Birmingham City Centre. They are improving it. But you can still see it's quite different to Lyon, which has loads and loads of metro lines, tram lines, bus rapid transit. You can get everywhere very quickly. It's easy to whiz around wherever you want. And so our suggestion, our idea was that maybe Lyon's better public transport made the city effectively bigger. And I'm going to explain how we calculated that, why we think that. I'm going to move, I showed you earlier, the 50 bus from Trafalgar Road to Birmingham. It's a great bus. The 50 bus is a top bus. But now I want to talk about a bus from Sturchley to Birmingham. It's a little bit to the west. It's quite a nice part of Birmingham. It has a lot of very nice beer shops if you're ever there, so I recommend it. This is how long it takes a bus to get from Sturchley to central Birmingham. And what we see is a similar pattern to what you saw in the first graph that I showed. It's just a little bit more complicated. The scheduled time in the blue does change over the day, and that's because National Express, who run the buses in the West Midlands, know that at peak time the buses go slower. But it's still the same thing, right? If you get that bus that's meant to take 15 minutes and you get on it at 5 o'clock in the morning, you will be in Birmingham City Centre in 15 minutes. And if you get on that bus at 10:30 at night and you want to get into Birmingham City Centre from Sturchley, you will be there in 15 minutes. The problem is that none of you want to do that at 5 in the morning or 10:30 at night. You want to go to Birmingham probably to get to work, and that's where it's a bit of a nightmare, because that bus is stuck in traffic. It takes you 40 minutes to get into town. And the same happens, you know, in the evening peak as well. I said there was one tram in Birmingham. The cool thing about a tram is it doesn't share any space with cars. So the scheduled time from Wednesbury, which is to the west of Birmingham, to central Birmingham is 30 minutes. And guess how long the tram takes? Doesn't matter when, it takes 30 minutes. Well, apart from here, it does share a little bit of space with the cars. So it does get slowed up a tiny bit, but not very much. And what we hypothesize is that in Lyon, where all the public transport is more like this tram, it's a metro, it's a tram, it's a segregated bus route, the journey times are completely predictable. Whereas in Birmingham, where the main source of public transport is a bus, the journey times are hugely variable and unpredictable. And what that means is we can calculate the size of Birmingham. We say, where can I start from and get to the city centre of Birmingham and we chose half an hour. We could choose 40 minutes, 50 minutes, 60 minutes, whatever. We chose half an hour. And what's quite interesting is that we'll start with at peak time, getting to work. Birmingham is quite small. Because the buses are congested, you can't get to central Birmingham from very far. So Birmingham is the circle in the middle, quite a small place. At off-peak time, just travelling 2 hours earlier, but when you don't want to be travelling because you want to still be in bed, Birmingham is quite a bit bigger. But then if you imagine that every bus could go as fast as a tram, but most importantly, as reliably as a tram, it's not really about the speed, it's about reliability, it's about not getting caught in traffic, then Birmingham becomes much bigger. And then what we did was we calculated the population of those three circles. And that is where we start to explain the reason why we think Birmingham has low productivity. So, you saw in the first graph that Birmingham's over here with a size, according to the OECD, of 1.9 million people. Birmingham local authority is about 1.1 million people. The reason that that's bigger is that actually you can walk from Birmingham City Centre west and you're in another local authority very quickly. So this size of 1.9 million is like Greater Birmingham, the West Midlands area. It's the places where people really go and work in Birmingham from. Places like Smethwick, Halesowen, those kind of places, Stourbridge. That's what we mean. And when we look at that, we say if Birmingham was a French city, it would be 33% more productive. It would have higher GDP just because of its size by a third if it was that big. But I've just shown you here we had blue, we had different colours of Birmingham being smaller, right? The number of people who live in that blue circle, well, it's like a pentagon or something, isn't it? Is actually 1.7 million. So it's a bit smaller, but it's about the same as the size that the OECD think Birmingham is. And off-peak, the people who live in that off-peak circle is 1.3 million people. But the number of people who live in the peak zone, the place that you can reliably get to central Birmingham from in half an hour at peak time, is only 0.9 million people. And at this point, there is no gap, right? This lagging of Birmingham's economy, the fact that it is poorer than it should be, which was 33% poorer than it should be, if we think that Birmingham is a city of 1.9 million, Actually, if we think that Birmingham is a city of 0.9 million, there's almost no gap. It does fine. So Birmingham does as well as we would expect for a city of its size, given that really it's pretty small. And having lived in Birmingham for 3.5 years, I can absolutely confirm that getting a bus in the morning is not very fun, and getting home at night is not very fun, which is why I cycled, but not everyone can cycle or wants to cycle. So, I've explained what we wrote up. You can read it all again in Citymetric. Now I'm going to get on to what we're doing next. Good. I'm kind of on time, Neil. I'm getting through it. Brilliant. What's next? Those little circles that I drew were a little bit of a fudge, right? They didn't look particularly impressive. They didn't look like data science and stuff, right? And the reason we did them was because at the time, that was the best we could do. But that's a bad idea, and what you really want to do is maps like this. So we have since generated the full version, every single bus route, and drawn maps. And in this case, these different colours are showing exactly what I did with the simplified circles or pentagons, but they're actual, you know, I can walk to the bus stop, get on the bus, the timetable tells me I can go this far. You can do all that using Open Trip Planner. It's brilliant, and that's what we've been using. So this tells you from central Birmingham, how far can I get in, and I think it's 10 minutes, 25 minutes, 40 minutes. We can set the boundaries wherever we like, and that's when we move on to the real what now. So there is an open standard for bus timetables, all public transport timetables, that's widely used. In the UK, we use a format called TransExchange, and Dan, who sat there, has written and published an open source converter from the UK standard TransExchange to the global standard, which was developed by Google, called GTFS. Right. We're getting into deep into bus timetable open data standards, but GTFS is brilliant because so many people use it. So what we've done is we've gone through our real journey time tool. We have calculated the time that we think every journey will really take, and we've produced a full GTFS format timetable of the real journey time of all public transport in the West Midlands. And that is the file that let us calculate this. But this was from an early version, and we've got a really brilliant version that's just ready to release. And once we've done it, we'll put it on the web at realjourneytime.co.uk, and those of you who are transport nerds can drop it into your tools and calculate all these isochrones, and it'll be brilliant. And you can do things like real journey time trip planning. So that's the next thing that we want to do. Transport API. I'm going to skip from top to bottom. With our real-time timetable, which is in GTFS, you can start doing journey time planning like you get in Google Maps for driving. Do you know when you put into Google Maps that if I want to drive now to Manchester, it will say, that should take you 43 minutes, but really it'll take you an hour and 20 minutes because we know that the M62 is going to be congested. You don't get that with the bus. It just shows you the timetable time in Google Maps. But we have produced a GTFS file that really tells you how long it's likely the bus will take. So you could now build a trip planning app that doesn't tell you how long the timetable takes you to get somewhere. It will tell you how long it will really take you to get somewhere, and that way you won't be late for your meeting. Right? That's the whole plan of it. Other things that we're doing are, we're making improvements for our API users. So I download all of this data from the Transport for the West Midlands API, and then I calculate real journey times between any 2 points in Birmingham. But then I make that open to anyone via an API, which is at realjourneytime.co.uk. And that's already being used by Birmingham City Council, by Highways England, by the Congestion Department at Birmingham City Council and Transport for the West Midlands, so that they can see in real time where a congestion is occurring that is affecting bus routes in Birmingham. If you look up Andy Radford at Birmingham City Council and his boss, Mel, they can tell you everything about what they're doing with that API to figure out when a builder who's fixing a road in Birmingham doesn't leave the site quickly enough, and they can see that it delays all the buses, and they ring them up and they shout at them, and it's great. That's what we want, right? We want people not to overrun on roadworks and hold up all the buses. So this has already been used. We're going to make improvements to our API for those users and figure out the extra uses that people want. I think that producing this GTFS export already will allow loads of people to do loads of great analysis better than we can do. So that's great. This is the third thing that we're doing. Transport for West Midlands and Birmingham City Council are putting in bus lanes, which is absolutely the right thing to do, because we saw that the buses run to time when there's no traffic, and they run slower when there's loads of traffic. So putting a bus lane, there's no traffic in a bus lane if you police it properly, and they've put in bus lanes. So there is a new bus lane and a bus priority system going in through Harborne, which is in the west of the city. We have been tracking the 22 and the 23 bus right since we started this process. We will be tracking the 22 and 23 bus as that bus lane comes in, is policed, is improved, and so on. And we want to evaluate how well that bus lane is working and how much bigger it makes Birmingham, and therefore what the economic impact is of the bus lane. And the early results on that is basically that the impact of a bus lane is much bigger than we thought it was, right? Previously, all we've done is we've counted the miserable people on the really slow bus and said, well, you earn about 10 quid an hour, don't you? And you've been waiting half an hour, so that's £5. That's how much the delays cost you. But when we start to think of bus delays as restricting the size of the city, the economic cost is far higher than it is by using those methods. We want to help TfWM regulate better. What I mean by that, the real example is there's something called traffic commissioners in the UK, and at the moment they make sure that buses run to time. And if buses don't run to time, they can fine them. And the idea of making a bus run to time when you're sat in traffic is ridiculous, because there's nothing that, all you could do is like buy a monster bus and drive over the cars. If you run a bus, you're going to be late because of traffic. It's not your fault. So Transport for West Midlands, lots of other people, Department of Transport are thinking about, should we really be punishing a bus company for not running to time if it's not their fault? Probably not. We can show whether or not it's their fault. We can see whether a bus is cancelled because the driver didn't turn up to work, or because the vehicle was broken down, or for some other reason. We can also see whether it's cancelled or slow or delayed because of congestion, and you can start to regulate better what you do. And the last thing that we're going to do is add more rail. So our current tool uses the Transport for West Midlands API. The Transport for West Midlands API is fantastic. It covers almost every bus in the West Midlands. And it covers all the trams in the West Midlands, which is pretty easy because there's only one tram line. But it doesn't cover rail. And you can get real-time data on train movements, but it's in a separate system. So it's in a national train monitoring system. I think it's called Darwin. We've started to add that to our tool. We did some checks to check that it didn't break our results. It doesn't make much difference to our results at the moment. But we think it might do when we consider longer journeys. So we were mostly looking at 30-minute journeys. It doesn't massively improve the size of Birmingham rail, but it is a widely used mode of travel commuting into the city, so we want to add it. So we will be adding more rail by adding that in, and then we will add that to the full GTFS export, and then anyone who wants to use it can do their analysis of travel times. And then last but not least is what we are not doing now, and this is the thing that most people have asked me for. Dozens of people have said, when are you expanding this to the whole of the UK? We are not. We are not doing that. We may expand it to Bristol. Shout out to the Bristol Open Data Bus API. The reason is that we require a field in the API that is not standard. There is a UK standard for powering those real-time information boxes. And the Transport for West Midlands API sticks to that standard, but then it adds something extra special that nowhere else does properly. The Transport for West Midlands API has a unique bus ID, attached to every departure. So behind the scenes, when we were at the start of this talk, I was looking at the 50 going to Birmingham that was going to leave in 2 minutes, and another 50 going to Birmingham that's going to leave in 7 minutes. And if you're in Leeds or Manchester or Glasgow, you'll get the same information. It will tell you that there's a 50 going to Glasgow in 2 minutes, but it won't tell you what the registration plate of that bus is or the unique ID of the ticket machine. In Birmingham, you get the unique ID of the ticket machine, and that is what lets us track all the buses all around the network forever. And since no other city has that unique bus tracking system at the moment, not available via an API as generous and as easy to use as Transport for West Midlands API, we just can't do it. So for the moment, we're going to continue doing all this great stuff in the West Midlands. I think that we should look at this as a positive, not a negative. If we'd stuck to the standard, we would have done nothing. The alternative to fantastic work that we've been able to do in Birmingham is not really being able to do it everywhere. The alternative, the most likely alternative, was doing it nowhere. So now that we've proved that we can do it in the West Midlands, we would love to work with any other transport authority that could add in the one extra field, some unique identifier to the bus departure, and then we'll build a tool there. So brilliant. Right, that's it. Last words from me are to thank everyone who's helped with the project. I gave a big list, but that list wasn't everyone. I'll have forgotten someone, and I've especially thanked the people I've forgotten. And then we'll have some questions from people here, and we'll take some questions from the hashtag ODI Fridays. Thank you all very much.
Well done, Tom. Thanks very much, Tom. I think what we'll probably do, if it's all right, Tom, is take the questions in the room first, and then we'll have a look on Twitter, and there's been at least one come through on Twitter, so we'll do those. We've got some mics in the room, so if anyone doesn't have any questions, please raise your hands, and then we'll get a mic over to you just so that anyone on the live stream can hear you asking your question. So does anyone want to ask Tom anything? Okay, we'll go here first. Just wait for a mic if you could. And ask away.
If you could tell us where you're from, that would be great as well.
Hi, I'm Lorna. I'm one of the co-workers here at ODI Leeds, and I work at Nexmo. I'm from Birmingham, so I'd be interested to know if you can tell me which is the worst bus route in Birmingham. Like, where should I not live?
Right. That is a great question. And I think it would make a brilliant article for somewhere like the Birmingham Mail or the Birmingham Post. And, you know, there's an API there, and you could look it up, and that would be a great thing to do. You can get a little bit of a clue for it if we go back to that map. And basically, the smaller that these ones are, that's the worst place to be. And in our early looking at it, I would say this is quite a painful place to live. Which is like, where is that? Quinton? Around there. And then here, southeast, that's quite good. These two, the great thing about the 50 bus is this one. And although it gets delayed all the time, it is every 2 minutes, so it's fine. And then this one is to Sturchley, and they're also really, really slow, but again, they are every 2 minutes, so it kind of makes up for it a little bit. And ultimate trick is that if you're in Sturchley, you can get a train to Cottridge. So yeah, I don't want to say which are the worst and which are the best buses, but it definitely could be calculated.
Thank you for your question. There was another one down here, I think. Yeah, if we can just get a mic down here. And as before, if you just tell us who you are and where you're from.
Hi, my name's Andy. I'm from, I work for Vodafone as a cloud architect. I'm just interested in whether you'd work with private companies in terms of getting information out of their APIs, private transport companies.
Yes, so the Transport for West Midlands API is sponsored by National Express. And National Express have helped us throughout this project, as have the West Midlands Bus Alliance. So there's quite a strong private sector involvement. I think, now that I've heard you say from Vodafone, I'm very excited, right? So one of the things we don't know that's been most frustrating about this project is I can track all the buses, but I've got no idea who's on them or how many people are on them. And I'd love to know that. And companies like Vodafone, O2, the rest, will know, to have some idea of how people travel around cities, and it would be fantastic to link together those two things on what's happening. I think that has to be the future of understanding how we, because obviously the ultimate goal of this maybe is to say, where are we going to put bus lanes? Which buses are we going to invest in first? Where are we going to put a new tram maybe? Birmingham's building 5, 6, maybe 7 segregated bus routes called Sprint. They've got to decide exactly where they want to go and stuff like that. You want to put those not just where the worst journey times are, but where the most number of people is. And at the Open Data Institute, we like to work in the open, we like to work with open data, but we work with loads and loads of closed data and private data and data models that can be shared in different ways, so we're well up for it.
Thank you for your question. I think we had one more at the back there, if we could get a mic over there. And as before, tell us your name and where you're from, please.
Hello, I'm Sarah and I write for Disruption, and we're based here in Leeds as well. So I'm just wondering, you mentioned the specific ID, the bus ID that made all of this possible.
Yeah.
Why is this unique to that region? Why aren't other areas using that as well?
Yes, it is a good question. I might get in trouble with Transport for West Midlands for my answer, but I'm just going to go for it because they're a nice bunch. So you can get those next bus countdown numbers everywhere in the UK, everywhere in Great Britain. There is a separate system for Northern Ireland by TransLink. Saved myself there. Everywhere for Great Britain, you can get it by Travel Line. So there's a service by Travel Line called NextBus. It will give you that information anywhere. And that operates to a standard, NextBus's standard, and the agreement in there was that it wouldn't share the unique ID of the bus. And I think one of the motivations for not sharing a unique ID of the bus is that bus companies, especially in competitive markets like Leeds, don't much like people tracking exactly where and when their buses move to different places. So they don't, where there have been competition issues with different companies, they don't want buses being snooped on so they can put new buses in and cut in front of stuff. So the standard doesn't include unique bus ID. There is some obstruction to the idea of unique bus ID. In the West Midlands, when they created the API, I have this suspicion that they just forgot to take it out. That's my guess. And I think that's quite nice in a way, because it means that by having different systems in different places, and even by people making mistakes, you can end up with an outcome that you just never imagined. They didn't leave in a unique vehicle ID because they wanted someone to build this tool. In fact, what they did, the first time that I met this was an event by Pauline Roach at West Midlands Open Data Forum. She had seen the API and she said, right, come and let's get some people, run an event, get some people to use it. I turned up, I said, I quite like the look of it. And then my eyes lit up and I went, yes, you've forgotten to take out the unique vehicle registration ID. They're brilliant. I didn't tell anyone that they'd forgotten to do it because I was worried that they might take it out. But so it's kind of through luck that they've done it. There is some hope though. So I mentioned Transport API earlier. I didn't say enough about them. It's possible that in the next 2 or 3 years, there will be a new UK standard for the bus countdown timetable, and it will be powered by something for the ultra nerds called SiriVM, which is vehicle monitoring, and it will have live location of the buses, and it will have unique bus ID. And once that's happened, Transport API are already working with Transport for West Midlands to make sure that this whole system can work across the whole of the UK on that thing. So the reason we were able to do it was luck and a good, really good API from Transport for West Midlands, and that's why we can't do it anywhere else.
Good. Thanks for your question. We've got one online, Tom.
All right, okay.
So one's come in using the hashtag ODI Fridays. It's from @handfolds, so thanks for your question. It's a good one. Finding this link between transport and the economy seemed like an unexpected outcome.
Yeah.
What was the outcome you expected to have when you set out to analyse these bus systems?
Well, I don't know if it was so unexpected because I've spent so much time sitting on buses being really angry about missing meetings. So I did kind of expect to find it. one of the reasons that we started the work was looking at delayed buses, not journey time. So we did about 2 years of work on a project that completely failed, which was to monitor bus delays. And all of us who live in Leeds will know that at peak times, West Yorkshire Metro, the Twitter account, tweets out basically every single day saying, due to congestion, there are large delays on, and then it lists every bus service in Leeds. And you go, well, thanks for that. Delays of up to 50 minutes on 55 bus services in Leeds. Great. So we started out trying to measure delays and track them. And the reason was just we wanted better buses. But it turns out that delays aren't very useful in a city like Birmingham, because the bus comes every 3 minutes. So when you're on a high frequency route, especially in Birmingham, to a certain extent in London as well, and some routes in Leeds will be the same, you just don't care about. The delay doesn't matter, you just turn up at the stop and you wait for the next one, and then you're miserable that it takes a long time. So I think we did expect to find an economic link. I think the real unexpected discovery was that when Transport for West Midlands published the API, they never expected it to be used in this way. And I never asked for permission either. That's been probably one of the most interesting things, is that we have got on very well with Transport for the West Midlands and National Express buses in Birmingham. And we get on very well with the City Council there. We've worked together brilliantly. But if they decided that they didn't want me to do this, they couldn't actually stop me. They've got an open API, I can just do it. So it's quite a nice, we've discovered that we can do something new, and because it was open, we didn't have to ask for permission and sign agreements and all that kind of stuff.
Good. We've got one more online that's just come through while you're answering that last one, from @JVSay. So thanks for your question, John. Is it possible to also look at modelling walking distances between bus stops and live locations to see if there is any benefit in incentivising, somehow, people to walk to the next bus stop?
Yes, it's a really good question. So, perfect. I haven't even set that up, Neil, but if I did set up a question, that is the one I would have set up. The first picture that I showed was of the 50 bus. I love the 50 bus, love it. Transport for West Midlands have been doing some studies on the 50 bus route recently, and they've been taking out bus stops so that there are fewer stops for the bus. The idea is that fewer stops, you can make progress a bit quicker. I don't know what the results of the evaluation of that are, but I think it's been reasonably positive. So basically, you might have to walk 100 metres further to get to the bus stop, but then the bus is 5 minutes quicker, so you're happy enough. And if you follow the work of, I think, Jarrett Walker, he's on Twitter as Human Transit, he designs bus routes. He's always about frequency is loads more important than having a bus stop right next to your house. It's better to walk 200 metres and have a really frequent bus service than just leave your house and have a bus that goes every hour. Right? So there's some important trade-offs to make there. And that is why the GTFS export that we now do is so important. So I showed you an isochrone map of travel time. The cool thing about the isochrone map is that, where was it? Here. The cool thing about the travel time isochrone map is that it includes walking. So when you put in a bus timetable as GTFS into Open Trip Planner, which is the open source software that created this map, it also lets you download OpenStreetMap, and then you have all of the walkable routes from every position on the map to the nearest bus stop. And so once you have the GTFS export, and you have OpenStreetMap, and you have Open Trip Planner, you've got 3 bits of open all at once, and it's like Power Rangers, isn't it? The power of 3 combine, and you can create like a mega open Power Ranger thing. So yes, we have walking time. I think that's very important to have in there. And I think that most of us who use the bus a lot know that one of the problems, I think, with Google Maps for transit directions is it will tell you to get, like, from here at ODI Leeds, we're near the bus station, and if I want to get somewhere in West Leeds, it might tell me to walk to the bus station, then get a bus for 1 minute, and then get a second bus, and I'd rather just walk to the stop. I think most people would rather do it. So yes, now in our original work, we didn't consider walking, but now we absolutely consider walking, and you can tweak all of your parameters to say how far are you willing to walk. Is walking easy for you? And I think that's going to be important when we look at accessibility as well. So for me, happy to walk a long way to a bus stop. For other passengers, don't want to walk a long way, getting that balance right, we can do it all with that.
Good. Yeah, thank you. Any more questions in the room? We've got one at the back there, if we can get a mic there. That's all the questions online, so I think we've already finished on this one. So if you can state your name and where you're from, please, and then your question.
Yes, John Lewis from Calderdale Council. I've been working with WICA recently on the new West Yorkshire Bus Alliance and West Yorkshire Transport Fund, and also the bus strategy. Have you had any talks with Transport from North about this sort of thing? So we've been working with some of the major transport groups, so I can't mention them on this sort of model.
Yeah. So I had a very nice meeting, had a black filter coffee, Neil, at Transport for the North. On Wednesday. Transport for the North are very interested in this work. At the moment, it feels to me like they're not quite sure what their job is as regards buses. So they are working on like a pan-northern travel card thing. And if they want to make a pan-northern travel card work, they've probably got to make it work on the buses. And that means that they've got to be thinking about measuring and tracking buses. So Transport for the North are definitely looking at it, working on it. Transport for Greater Manchester are looking at it, working on it. We have had many discussions with West Yorkshire Combined Authority. There are some things that need to change in the real-time API, but I think they can happen. So I think we're pretty positive about working with West Yorkshire, South Yorkshire, Greater Manchester, probably Mersey Travel as well, and probably Nexus in the northeast, so Newcastle, Sunderland area. And I think those are the cities that will benefit from it most. The other good thing is our code is open and the data is open, so they can think about how they might want to implement it. We're very happy to implement it, and I think that now they know what the extra field that's needed is. So all of the infrastructure already exists in West Yorkshire to do this. The bus tracking technology exists, and we could do with the extra unique bus ID. I suppose Calderdale, for listeners who don't know, has big towns in it, you know, Halifax, Brighouse, places like that, with quite frequent bus services. Quite a lot of it's quite rural. I don't think that this type of analysis would be massively helpful for rural buses, because once you're not running a high frequency service, you don't care about the congestion as much. You really care about the delay, and this is about journey time. But there's a lot of progress being made, and it's the more open data there is, the more places we can do it.
Thank you very much, Tom, and thank you very much for all of your questions. Can we finish with a round of applause for Tom, please? Thanks, thank you for those of you in the room. Thank you for coming along to the lunchtime lecture. For those of you online as well watching the live stream, thanks to you as well. Thanks, Tom, for presenting. Enjoy the rest of your Friday and have a good weekend.
Thanks all.